In the morning of January 15, 2002, thousands of Nigerians gathered in front of every branch of the Savannah Bank of Nigeria across the country, some wailing while others were protesting. What was happening? The Central Bank of Nigeria had just dropped a drastic bombshell that shook the entire banking industry of the nation. The banking license of one of Nigeria's top commercial banks has been withdrawn. Why was Savannah Bank's banking license revoked? And what was the aftermath of this very bad news? The apex bank of the nation, under the leadership of Joseph Oladele, accused the Savannah Bank of not complying with the CBN obligations, including the very grave situation of the bank not having enough assets to meet liabilities. In other words, the Savannah Bank was accused of not having enough funds to pay off its depositors, creditors, or fulfill other financial obligations. Remember, we are talking about a bank with over 140 branches all over the country and a top dog at the time. What was going to be the fate of its depositors? The account holders of the sanctioned banks, upon hearing the news, hurried to the nearest center of the financial institution to get the news of what was happening for themselves. But the Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation, the NDIC, had already swung into action, sealing the bank's offices and preparing for a proper liquidation action. This move would involve the selling off of all the assets of the bank to pay off its debts and liabilities. However, it did not seem as if Senator Jim Nwobodo and his cohorts would be willing to let their banking business go down so easily. Senator Jim Nwobodo headed the bank as chairman, alongside other notable men such as Senator Felix Bajomo, the executive director, and Shetima Mustafa, a federal minister and board member who was not a shareholder. Well, just like millions of Nigerians pulled the garments of these men, they also were not willing to let go of their grip on the CBN either, and the matter was taken to court, with Savannah Bank suing the CBN, the NDIC, and the Inspector General of Police for their joint action in closing the bank. You see, the Savannah Bank was certainly not the first bank in Nigeria to be declared in distress and closed down by the CBN during that period. It was a time when a raging storm was hitting the Nigerian banking industry, and from 1993 until that point in time, 33 banks had already been shut down by the CBN for reasons concerning their inability to maintain sustainable operations. The Savannah Bank of Nigeria extended the CBN's kill count to 34, but turned out to be the most controversial of all, given that the action of the CBN against the bank was rejected by the board of directors of Savannah Bank, who claimed that they were not in any distress. In short, the resistance with which the development was met made the whole saga seem like a political attack on the bank by the CBN. Did politics really influence the downfall of Savannah Bank? Was it just another political maneuver to get score points? Rumor has it that former President Olusegun Obasanjo targeted the bank to settle a personal score with former Enugu State Governor Jim Nwobodo, who owned the majority share of Savannah Bank and had fallen out of favor with the powers that be in the ruling party PDP. Despite the central bank and NDIC's strong claim that the decision was purely professional, many believed the conspiracies that flew around. The whole move seemed like a perfect way to bring Nwobodo down by crippling his financial stronghold, Savannah Bank. The public never for once suspected that the bank was going through any form of crisis, nor did the bank shareholders, or else people would have been withdrawing their holdings in the bank long ago and not wait until their very dire moment when nobody was unsure of what the news could be. Billions of naira in deposited savings were at stake, and panic set in as customers scrambled to gather crucial documents to prove ownership of their accounts and claim their assets. However, it turned out that things weren't as easy as they appeared to be. The refunding process kept getting halted for one excuse or another. Millions lined up at the bank offices every day and were told to come the next day. The promises of the next day soon turned into weeks and weeks into months, yet the majority of account holders had not been refunded. Was the CBN right when they stated that the Savannah Bank did not have assets to match its liabilities? Or was the liquidation process just being handled by inefficient hands? After about 4 years of endless court drama, the Federal High Court in Abuja delivered a ruling on October 20, 2006 that upheld the action of the CBN. Expectedly, the Savannah Bank of Nigeria was not satisfied with the verdict and further appealed the judgment, which was, until 3 years later, upturned by the Court of Appeal on February 5, 2009. On February 9, 2009, the CBN held a meeting in the Financial Sector Surveillance Committee to review the judgment asserted by the Court of Appeal in favor of the Savannah Bank and against the revocation of its banking license. The CBN maintained that their action in the revocation of the bank's license was done in the interest of the bank's depositors and the banking system in general. The CBN also stated that they were not satisfied with the latest ruling of the court that highlighted that the regulatory sector had carried out their action in bad faith. While 100 million naira in damages was awarded against the CBN and the NDIC to Savannah Bank Nigeria, CBN highlighted that there were abundant grounds for further pursuing the case at the Supreme Court, the apex banking body together with the NDIC, but they decided not to and chose to adhere to the ruling of the appeal court to reinstate the bank into operation for the sake of bleeding account holders of the bank whose deposits in the bank had been trapped for over 7 years. Did this mean that the problems of Savannah Bank were over? Well, let's find out. In the ruling carried out by Justice U.M. Abba that ordered the withdrawal of police presence across all Savannah Bank premises nationwide, the bank was also given a minimum of 18 months to pay a mandatory recapitalization fund of 25 billion naira to CBN, an equivalent of about $296 million at the time. The Central Bank of Nigeria required every bank to maintain a minimum core capital of this amount in liquid assets at all times, as a condition for continued licensing and operation. The situation was looking grim for the Savannah Bank of Nigeria, and analysts predicted that raising the cash would be a challenge for them. However, a spokesperson for the bank stated that although the road will be a long and tortuous one for Jim Nwobodo and other stakeholders, the most important thing was that justice had eventually been served. To further affirm that the 7-year siege on Savannah Bank was over, the CBN urged the managers of Savannah Bank to take all necessary measures to reopen the bank to the public as soon as possible, while the NDIC claimed that they never went through the liquidation of the bank's asset. What this meant was that the fate of Savannah Bank now lied in its hands, as all that the executives had to do was recapitalize and begin operations. 18 months counted and passed, and the Savannah Bank of Nigeria was yet to provide the funds for its recapitalization. In defense of itself, the bank, through Wemimo Ogunde, the lawyer who argued the bank's case, stated that despite having been given the mandate to reopen upon recapitalization, the bank had other important issues to address. He stated that Savannah Bank was currently concerned with the verification of assets among depositors, including being engaged with other renovation processes. In details, the bank wanted to verify customers who wanted to get their money back and signify those who wanted to remain. For Savannah Bank, those were more important issues than the recapitalization. Meetings with Savannah Bank managers and the CBN were constantly held, but the outcome of such meetings was shrewdly kept in secrecy, with either party unbothered to disclose the progress on each side. It is still unclear whether the stakeholders of the SBN were given an extension, but according to a central bank spokesman, Savannah Bank was employing every strategy within their means to raise their recapitalization funds, and the apex banking body of the nation was acknowledging those efforts. However, some weeks later, reports came in citing a move by the First Inland Bank to sell a property belonging to Jim Nwobodo for failure to meet the terms of a loan he secured from the commercial bank in efforts to raise money for the revival of his bank. This news revealed that things weren't all that bright on the side of the desperate SBN managers, who were the only beacon of hope for their depositors and shareholders. Account holders of the bank who were once excited about the February 5, 2009 court ruling were once again thrown into the shadows of the February 2002 events. The current situation meant that they might have to wait longer to access their funds. The Savannah Bank has been brought back into business, but it had to show significant financial capability before the CBN resumed operations with them. Until this endless wait finally became over, thousands of lives were continued to be thrown into shambles, and the plight of masses seemed ignored both by Savannah Bank and the government. There were several reports of people who didn't receive the progression of events in good faith and died of heartbreak, while several families were thrown into poverty and frustration as their breadwinners went penniless in a twinkle of an eye. A certain Uche Ephraim reported to the media houses how the closure of the Savannah Bank had changed the financial trajectory of his family in a bitter way. He said, "All the earnings of my father were saved in Savannah Bank for the sake of the children, but all turned to disaster just at the moment we needed it most. This act brought untold hardship to my family, and the shock of the bank's liquidation did not spare my dad's life, as he suffered shock and finally gave up the ghost when there was no hope." This was a similar story to the situation of thousands of Nigerians at that time, and help didn't seem forthcoming from anywhere. While a few managed to get reimbursements on their deposits, the majority had to live with the results of the ugly events all their lives. Up until today, the Savannah Bank saga is still filled with blame avoidance, empty promises, and reiterations about the active status of the bank that reflects anything but the reality. While the banking system in Nigeria is now relatively stable, unlike before, the empty banking halls of the Savannah Bank still invoke a lack of trust among Nigerians and the banking system, especially with the NDIC, whose job it is to secure the interests of depositors in the face of ugly events such as this. Today, the Nigerian banking system is even more liberal, with the introduction of online banking systems, and while the age-older demographic hesitates in their acceptance of it, the Savannah Bank incident has proven that traditional banks are not any safer. In the end, we are very few that have faith in the competence and stable structure of our financial institutions, while hoping that the events of January 5, 2002 would only be a thing of the past.